Rob, you had a haircut recently or anything?
No.
Or when was the last time you had a haircut?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Over 2 months? Over 2 months?
I'm not criticizing you. I'm just asking.
No, well, probably 2 months. Probably be another month before I get one.
Okay. We can do the ponytail thing, Rob.
That's it.
Make shaving your head all good, right? Yes, Bazemore.
That's right.
I can make an appointment with my barber anytime.
That's right.
Okay, so we got some trivia questions here. This is a physiotherapy question, Rob.
Uh-oh.
Does the average person wear out the left or right sole of their shoes first? Left or right shoe? Which one wears out quicker?
Left.
I'll say right.
That's a 50-50. The answer is right. I have no reason to understand why, but maybe people lean on that foot a little more. Or...
Rotation of the
People are right-handed, so I don't know.
That's right.
What foot's back in block?
What's that?
What foot is typically sitting further back in blocks, the right or the left?
I would say right, but that's me. Like, again, if I don't know. It's interesting. I don't even know where they got that stat from. Okay, this is a Bob Alejo question. Very relevant here. At what age, Bob, is a man generally in his peak physical condition?
Ooh. That's a good one. I'm going to generalize and say mid-30s.
28.
29.
The answer is Michael Jordan, 23.
Really?
You know, I thought using that, you know, what's funny? So we were, when I was involved with training Jackie Joyner, you know,
come on.
Second or, I don't know if it was second or third Olympics, but, you know, she was getting older now, right? And Bobby Kersey, who was then her husband and coach, ended up saying that, you know, we think Jackie's going to have this great year. So she was in her 30s. And he went back and did research, and the highest HEP scores at the time, now this was, late 80s, early 90s, had occurred in the 30s for HEPs. So he's like, we expect the best year ever here, you know. So
was that like the skill specific thing? Like,
I don't know. I thought it was no. I mean, I was thinking more along, you know, the male line is when I was thinking it had to be much younger, but I was surprised to find out that the best scores were happening then.
I'd be curious as to if somebody did a survey on like what is the year in the age of a golfer, what is their peak performance? What age would that be because of the skill and not necessarily the physiological? What do you guys think it would be? This is not on the card, so I'm just curious.
Somewhere between 30 and 35, maybe.
Anyway, I don't golf, so I couldn't tell you.
See, I think it would be in golf. I think it would be more about risk taking. You know, I think when you're younger, you think you can just blast it.
Okay.
That I think the scores, you know, the approach on those scores at some point the scores end up being the same, but the approach changes.
Okay, we'll do a couple more questions, then we'll warm everybody up here. What is the historical reason? Now, this is going to change, obviously. What is the historical reason why we shake hands with each other every time we meet? It's actually a good answer. I like it.
It's to check to see if they had a sword smuggled underneath their sleeve.
Concealed weapon. Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. Somebody who works for the service. Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I just
That's
heard that
awesome. Where'd you learn that, Brian?
It's classified.
Okay, well. Okay, just because you're so smug right now, this question's for you. Why do men have nipples?
Oh, God.
It's got something to do with when the chromosomes are in the woman, they're both the same. So both have nipples when they're in the I forget what time that is within the birth.
Brian Miller is fucking killing it today. During the first 6 weeks of life, all fetuses develop to become a woman. Right?
That's what I meant to say.
So you're 2 for 2, man. Okay.
What are you doing, Brian? Watching Jeopardy all week?
Okay. This
Get
is a Brian
outside.
Miller. This is a Brian Miller, Bob Alejo, Omar Sanchez, and Adrian Braismore, maybe even Francois. I don't know. Can a person who is completely bald have dandruff?
Yes.
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 Yes,
That's
you're right.
definitely what it
It is
is.
more common in people with hair, though. Yes.
And more
Awesome.
unsightly than you can imagine.
Uh, is it true that a silent fart smells worse than a loud one?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody's right. Everybody knows. Okay, silent but deadly. All right, so let's get started here. We talked last couple of weeks, and I think one of the things that came out of a lot of the conversations we had was how are people dealing with this stuff? I'm just gonna mute everybody here. How are people dealing with the current situation? Which teams, which athletes are actually pulling together and actually getting work done? And so Rob and I were talking about culture, and we interviewed Coach Vermeil a couple days ago. I'll get that out shortly. But one of the things that we found interesting was, and I saw it I watched the third or fourth episode of The Last Dance, and after they lost to the Pistons, they were in the weight room the very next day. So that's an issue of culture and common goals, objectives, and being on the same page. So we wanted to talk about culture today and how important is that? And a lot of people talk about it, but do they actually have it? Is it actually present? And is it going to pull people through this time? Like, our NCAA programs, are certain teams going to be more successful because they have the culture and everybody's pulling in the same direction? Our pro teams, like even with some of the work I've been doing with the True Form treadmills, a couple of teams have contacted me and said, yes, we're going to start using that. We're going to start getting them out to players, and they're hustling to find ways to get athletes to train, whereas other teams aren't doing much from what I gather. So I want to start off with let's start with Bob, and then we'll get Rob in next. But Bob, what are your thoughts on this, like in terms of the culture you've established at your place? You haven't been there that long, but what kind of culture have you established that you think is helping during this time?
Accountability, I think, is the biggest thing. And that goes with the sport coaches as well. And I do think that we're in, and I think I hit on this a little bit last time. I think we're in a good spot as a mid-major school without football and without all the resources, because it's like everybody talks about their culture and our buy-in and all that. And I think I mentioned last week, like, well, when you have 20 platforms and 15 HD TVs and music blaring and, 3 nutrition stations in your weight room, it ain't that fucking hard to get guys in your weight room, or women, right? So now those schools that had those, now they got exactly what I got, 0. So now let's see what kind of culture and buy-in you have now. And I really think it's going to, like we talked about last week, it puts these coaches now, makes it easy now to see who's got buy-in and who's the leader of their team. I think it's the same thing in the weight room. And so I keep telling our kids that story and, building that on through the coaches and the other parts of the performance group, and just saying, like, look, you're going to be accountable on this, because I'm going to make sure that I assess exactly what we're giving you. Well, I think we've done it enough, and I'm understanding enough from the Zooms that I've had and the discussions that I had that, we can't take any days off. And again, so it's easy to have buy-in too, right? When you have a game on September 16th, and then you have, practice starts on this day and all that. Well, right now we don't really know. So for instance, on small things, but like on the volleyball, women's volleyball, men's, women's soccer sheets, I put preseason as the training cycle, because it is. At the same time, I say you can't just not train like we're not going to come back on any one of these weeks, right? And that's kind of the way we attacked it before too. Like, we're always making today important. We can't take a play off, a lift off, and this is super important that we do that now. And again, that's what I feel like we've developed, but now we're going to see, right? Like, we're going to absolutely see now. especially with the indecisiveness of the direction and beginning dates.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. We don't know when. I think we see this optimism around like, yes, we're going to open up, but nobody's really committed to it, especially in terms of the institutions and the team. So it's like a moving target, and I think that's mentally draining to some degree, isn't it?
I don't think so. I mean, that's why you have to keep in their ear about today's workout, not when are we going to play. You got to work out today. We'll worry about that other shit later. I mean, it's out of our control. I've got these things set up so that, you know, we can start tomorrow if we want to, or we can start in 10 weeks, you know, and things going to keep going out. And at some week, you know, and some week, like in the fall, I'll have to decide, or maybe it'll be decided for me early enough that, okay, now we're just not going to do preseason training anymore. We're going to go back into off-season training because now the season's canceled. But until then, you know, I keep telling them, don't get caught off guard, because I really think that the bigger schools are taking it off. I think they're just like, you know, I just think they are. And I think this is our chance to jump ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump quickly to Mike Hurst, because I've been going back and forth with Mike Hurst on the sort of the mental health aspects of responding to different announcements. And Mike, we talked about the Olympics, and I'll let you elaborate on it and what you're dealing with right now as a coach and a bit of a therapist as well.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it was pretty traumatic. I've got one athlete in my little group who was definitely going to go to the Olympics. Had definitely done all the work, had run about 5 PBs, all the rest of it. Just a kid, 21-year-old physiotherapist, Beck Bennett. And, you know, as she said to me the other day, on the Monday I was in the team announced unofficially. And then on Friday, the games were off. She said it was just really hard to deal with. And I know that she went into a little bit of depression there for a while. And it's been, I think, quite traumatic for a lot of people. It's just not knowing, I think, is the biggest issue. Not knowing, is there going to be a games? Then you get former Japan Prime Minister Mori saying that if it has to be postponed again, we'll just cancel it. So that's, again, it's another kick in the guts for people who've really put their life on hold to go for the games. From a psychological kind of underpinning, I've tried to make them realise that it wasn't a wasted season, and that all of them hopefully, all of them have achieved good results and have had good life experiences. And so I asked them each to write out 10 best moments of the season. And I expected to receive those. All but one of the 9 or 10 athletes has submitted those. And a couple of them have said, I didn't realise how important this was for my state of mind, that this has really helped me, because I now realise that I actually did do a lot of good things, none of which I regret, and many of which I'm quite proud of. And it forced me to just go back over the year and appreciate all the things that had come out of all the coaching that we'd been doing together, and the trips and the international experiences that they'd had. So I don't know where else to go with this, Derek, at the moment.
So how are you managing them? Like, in terms of, like, you know, they have these athletes talking to you and saying, like, there could not be an Olympics. Like, it's not just postponed, it might not even happen. Now, I don't know what the IOC is going to do about that. Will they shift it somewhere else? But if Japan says, hey, screw it, this is just too stressful, we can't figure this out, how are you going to manage the athletes? Like, do you keep them focused? Do you keep them training? Do you let them just relax? I don't know.
What I've tried to get through to them is that it's not international sport, particularly the Olympic sports, are not all about the Olympic Games. There are other major events on. World Championships, Commonwealth Games. For Europeans, there's the European Championships. There's Pan Am Games for North Americans, Central Americans. So there's local, and I just said, if the Olympics didn't exist, if there was no such thing as the Olympics, would you still be in the sport? And all of them said, yeah, I would be, because I enjoy it. I said, so that's all you need to know. And let's keep training. Let's go back into off-season general prep, and we'll ease into it. And as soon as we get something more definite, we can crank it up and get more specific in our work. But at the moment, it's very general. We're in an accumulation phase of work, and we can try a few new things. And I think that they have all continued. We've only got problems with one person, and I'll sort that out pretty soon.
Do you think from a financial point of view that things could collapse because a lot of stuff is based on results at the Olympics in terms of funding? I know that's what happens in Canada with their podium projects. Is that similar for you? Do you think, okay, if we don't even have an Olympics, what's the point of pouring money into athletes if there's no Olympics?
Well, and I agree. And the second thing is that a lot of the funding, every Olympiad in the last, say, 18 months, comes from the Australian Olympic Committee to Aussie national federations, and helps to support the federations and their allocations to individual athletes. Excuse me.
Yeah,
So,
it's going to be in disarray to some degree.
It will be in some disarray unless you've got a fantastic individual sponsor. And I would say that in lieu of what's just happened, I think future contracts are going to be negotiated with an out clause as well. If the meets are cancelled, sorry, all bets are off. We're not interested in sponsoring a team that's going nowhere.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I wanted to just quickly jump. We'll comment on that, but Francois, you had some information on what you received from the NHL and what they're looking for in terms of a return. I'd be curious to let people comment on that as well, and see where that's going.
Yeah, for sure. NHL return to play protocol approved by the NHL owners. So May 15, players can start. Some of them will, and some of them will not. Going to their home rinks in small groups, subject to local stay at home orders. June 1st, start of 3-week training camps in home city. June 21st, teams go to one of the 4 NHL cities, possible exhibition games. The NHL cities are not stated, so we don't know if it's going to be in Canada or the US. July 1st, regular season continues with every team playing 76 games instead of 82. Games will be played in empty buildings with no fans. July 21st, playoff starts with no changes, 4 rounds, best of 7. Plan is to slowly introduce fans to games by conference finals with buildings at half capacity. Stanley Cup finals to finish by end of September. 2021 season training camp open mid-November. Regular season to start around December 15. And Gary, it's a really interesting part. Gary is looking to make this schedule somewhat permanent going forward, starting season in December and playing playoff through the summer. So,
First, Francois, what are your thoughts on that? And then I want other people to comment. This is interesting.
The first thing, the quality of the ice in some of the rinks is going to be absolutely terrible. And they want to compete against baseball in the U.S. during all summer. I think it's a commercial suicide, if you ask me. I think it's a terrible idea, but I'm not in charge of that, so that's the 2 things that come in mind. All the players that I talked to, they were talking about quality of the ice, that it's going to be straight up terrible. So huge issue for injuries and stuff like that. Playing during most of the big rinks like Madison Square Garden, name it, usually the ice is always bad, you know? So it's going to be even worse, I think, if they do that during the summer.
Did
So
he
they're-
give any reasoning, Francois? Did Gary Bettman give any reasoning for?
I think just to get out of flu season, like get out of the deepest part of flu season, so they're not. That's my assumption. Sam Feldman, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so first off, I just wanted to clarify, Francois, how is this fully agreed upon already, or is this like just being put to a vote? I wanted to make sure I heard you right on that, and then I'll give my piece on how I think it may influence baseball season, but I don't think it could be as bad as Francois was alluding to.
Francois?
I'm sorry, Sam. I couldn't hear the first. I lost the connection.
No, you're fine. Is this already agreed upon, or is this being taken to a vote to be agreed upon?
No. It's not being agreed upon. So it's probably never going to happen because of the player association, I think.
Interesting.
That's my
Okay,
guess.
so
That's my guess.
So it's a proposal by the owners.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Exactly.
No, I don't think though it would, if it were to be passed, but I'm guessing it won't be. I don't think it would, at least here, get as affected by baseball season, even though they would overlap. It already fights with basketball too, anyway, a little bit, and with summer, people do want to head indoors some because it gets so hot. So people would find an alternative to baseball, I think, as well.
Maybe.
It could work well, but the problem then becomes if basketball shifts as well, which they might. Hockey probably does better staying where they were in that case.
Probably, yeah, right.
Rob, you got any thoughts on this in terms of even one, just the quick? It's a pretty ambitious return from a timeline point of view.
It is. I think they're going to do something this year. I think following up, it's all going to come down to revenue. I think if they make money and they get the numbers that they want, and when the players' collective bargaining agreement arrives in the NHL and the players agree to it, I guess it can sustain. And personally, I'm not sure if it will, considering if the NBA, what was just stated, if the NBA and baseball and everything else is going at the same time, if the revenues are not there due to too much competition, they're going to have to change. Money talks. So, right now they have to do something. Whether it becomes permanent, I guess that's to be seen.
With your own businesses, what's happening in terms of like return to work, things opening up? What requirements? Has there been much discussion around at least your professional association and physical therapy?
Within the association, they give you guidelines, et cetera. With regards to the business, you adhere to those guidelines. You adhere to the guidelines of the CDC, right? And then as patients and athletes become available, then you obviously increase business, right? We have furloughed a lot of people, meaning we haven't fired them. Essentially, they are still eligible for employment. They're not on payroll. They're collecting unemployment, but we are paying their medical benefits, both our contribution and their contribution, so they haven't lost their medical benefits. We have a $1 million fund where we are assisting people with mortgage payments, financial necessities and needs. We've arranged that to be done. And so as doctors start to see patients again, which they have, and it's slow, like in some hospitals, doctors are permitted to see patients 1 day a week, no more than 20 patients, give or take. They have 1 surgical day a week, no more than 3 or 4 surgeries to be performed in that day. And around mid-May, they'll reevaluate. And they'll either, if the virus and the things start to spike, then they'll reduce or stop those numbers. If they want more time to evaluate, they'll maintain it. And if the numbers continue to decrease, then I guess they can advance that. Same thing with athletes training. As restrictions are lifted and you maintain requirements by the CDC and people are comfortable, then athletes will start to train again. So it's a waiting game of a very slow progression. And that's how we're looking at it. So we're looking to get busier, at least on the physical therapy component, based on doctors getting busier and being permitted to do elective surgery in the month of May. And so those patients need rehab. So we're going to, you know, and then we'll slowly, as based on the volume of patients available, start to rehire the people we furloughed, right, based on supply and demand and need, and continue to move forward. The biggest problem I think that's going to happen with regards to private business is the size of your facility, right? So we have some facility, like our performance center is 20,000 plus square feet, including physical therapy. It's very easy for us in that facility to our projections to see patient volume with, you know, 6 feet or greater distance between patients, right? Some of our facilities are in private gyms. Gym we work with is called the Equinox. We have about 20 facilities in 20 Equinox gyms throughout our footprint, our business footprint. And so the way we arrange an Equinox facility, we take out a square footage of space for treatment, but then we have access to the locker rooms and the gyms for exercise, so to speak, right? So now you have this small facility where you do your hands-on, et cetera. That's going to be more difficult in regards to patient volume, right? With restrictions, et cetera. So you just have to figure those things out.
As far as like the corporate culture and what you've kind of built up over these, you know, many years, and has that kind of helped, like in terms of, you know, you being considered by your employees like a good employer, and obviously you're helping with, like you said, the mortgage payments or whatever, and help having their health care paid for, so that helps. But is that something that you've kind of over the long term developed, not anticipating this, but certainly to kind of just build this confidence in the company and you as an employer?
I think, you know, you learn from things like 9/11, you learn from things like Sandy, right? You learn from things like that because you have unexpected, or even if it's an expected event like Sandy, right? You know, you're not given much warning. What are you given, a couple of weeks or a month? And so I think certain things arise that what's unique about those situations is it's not just your company, it's how you also help community, right? And that's where we kind of are now as well. And that's where we're saying, you know, so we have these funds, we're helping our own people, which is really our community. I mean, I agree 100% what Bob said before, but I look at culture as, you know, it's the organization. And then you have your departments within the organization, right? So culture to me is like, if we go to what Bob said before, culture to me is everybody being accountable, everybody being clear on what they're responsible for, their objectives, right? And they have to be accountable for their performance of those objectives. So what does that mean? That means when Bob needs a new weight room, the boosters are raising money. That means the people who are responsible for building that weight room get it done on time. That means facilities maintains everything in that weight room the way they're supposed to. And so then Bob could go into that weight room and he writes his programs, and those are his responsibilities with his coaches, et cetera. And if Bob needs to go to the video department and say, listen, I want you guys to come in to fill my people so I could break things down, then they're prepared to do that for Bob, right? So it's a culture to me is the organization with each department contributing to the success of that organization. And so it's kind of like with a good culture, you get, what's the word I'm looking for? You get accountability, and that evolves to self-accountability. And self-accountability correlates with self-discipline and preparation, right? And so when you have accountability, that's the difference between someone going to work and saying, this is my job, or that's someone going to work and saying, I am here to participate and contribute, whether it's information, physical, whatever it is, to the success of the organization to which my department is part of as a contributing factor. That's culture to me. So to go back to your question, now we wind up with this COVID-19, right? Which is totally like, what happened? Well, what is everybody going to do? What's the plan? Unfortunately, we had to furlough people, right? Because what we have to do to survive as a business is create a long enough financial runway to get out of this. So you have to lower expenses. You have to figure out what facilities could still operate, which ones to close, and all those things to get this long financial runway. So as things start to come back to normalcy, you're still in business to start to ramp up again and bring everybody back. And so, okay, because you have this culture, everybody understands what you're trying to do. Now, we're not the only ones furloughing people or and people are being laid off. I mean, we have unemployment, as you guys know, in record numbers. So I don't think there's much bitterness at all. People understand what's going on. And so what you try to do is, okay, I appreciate you understand it, but not only do we want to acknowledge your appreciation by providing the healthcare benefits, providing this fund to help you with finances, et cetera. And everybody works together, so finance, what monies do we have, and how are we distributing these monies, and how are we conserving these runways, and human resources, how are we going to relay these messages, and working with legal, that what is compliance and what is the legal way to do this, and clinical operations, how are we running this business that we've come up with this plan, and so on and so forth. It's no different. So to me, culture is the organization, which every department, there's an old saying, all of us is a lot smarter than one of us, right? And so that's what it is, to me.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump to Brian Miller on that, just this idea of this culture that's been part of the organization. And Brian, I was telling Brian that we're watching some older documentary from 2017. It's like a season with Navy football, and we watched before that, I think it was Florida State. So you get to see the difference in culture there, right? Which is pretty stark. So
Yeah.
But Brian, like, what can you tell us about being at the Service Academy and the culture there that has kind of helped at this time that was, developed over hundreds of years?
Well, I think with the concept of culture within the military institutions, this is somewhat what the student bodies are searching for. They're searching for structure, which they don't have right now, so that is a big challenge for them. But they are searching for a purpose that they're going to transcend what they are able to contribute. And that's exactly what we are asking all of them within all of the military, within this country. So, flipping it back to athletics, if you just look at individual teams and what is their vision, what's their mission, and a lot of them, the number one thing on there is going to have something to do with winning, or something to do statistically with wins and losses. And that right now is not going to help you at all if that's your priority. Now there's other teams, and again, a lot of the service academies, winning is not the number one thing on their list. Speaking for the United States Naval Academy, their two big points that they preach is ownership of action and the honor system, and that's what we need right now out of our athletes, but also out of anyone at the Naval Academy. We need ownership. They need to find ownership of their actions every day, and then they need to be able to. We need to be able to trust what their answers are, and that's what the honor system is based on. So that's how the culture within these military institutions is grounded.
Yeah, because everybody's wearing a shirt that says "Beat Army," and you really can't do that right now. It's just not part of that motivation strategy, right?
That's correct. Beat COVID-19. That's what it should be.
Yeah, we'll swing it back to Bob. Bob, after hearing what Rob and Brian said, like, is that pretty much in line with what you've tried to do there?
I mean, what's interesting to me is and I put something out the other day on, I think it was both Facebook and Twitter, about changing jobs, and that the criteria for changing jobs and moving to the next level and all that changes as you get older, right? In the beginning, you're just, you're hard charging, you're single, and then all of a sudden, your criteria for the next job or your criteria for the best job gets wider and more varied, right? Kids, life-changing events, divorce, family, and all of a sudden it changes, which is to say there really shouldn't be, if you think about it, too deep of thought saying like, oh man, why would that guy leave that spot? Oh my God, he's going to that spot. Oh, or she's going to that spot. And there's so many things. And so when I listen to Rob talk about commitment, and buy-in, notice how he wasn't saying like, everybody's paying attention to me. Like when I tell them to do stuff, they're going to do it. What he's saying is this wider thing like that doesn't mean me. It means you. Buy-in is about you, not me. Right. So I like the idea of when we talk about, collaboration, and this has to do with this buy-in thing. It's not that the important thing is not, it's not that, how am I going to say this? I need you to help me do my job. So when people say, hey, like if I was to get on you, say, Derek, like, Derek, you're the trainer, like, come on, man, let's get going. And, like, why are you, getting on me? I'm the trainer. I know what I'm doing. No. I don't give a shit about that. I just give a shit about you keeping me from doing my job. It becomes bigger than that, right? I know I'm doing it, but I need your help to do it. And that's where this thing branches out into this, this commitment, this collaboration is more like a fractal of a team, right? Like I don't, I know LaRussa did that. The one thing about LaRussa that he did for me immediately was he made me feel like I was absolutely a critical part of our success. So now he put it on me not to disappoint him, right? So it wasn't up to me anymore whether I thought I was doing a good job. It's whether I thought he thought I was doing a good job. And that's, I think, where we lose things. Everybody's here like, well, I'm busting my ass, but Dash, he's not doing shit. Like, well, that's not my choice, right? That's not it at all. I want to work so hard that Dash thinks I'm really good. And I think that's the buy-in piece. I'm working so hard that my teammates, like this commitment culture thing is about all the bullshit that we say happens. Like, it's about the guy next to you. Like, fuck you. How many people really do that, right? It's a really cool thing to say, like, oh, I'll be in a foxhole with you. Like, it's about the guy standing next to you. Like, kids now, they have less of a chance to do that or imposed upon them than any other time in my years of coaching. So when you get to the point where, that we've seen, I know Rob, I'm just talking on a professional level. I know Rob has seen it where you get a player coming up to you, or like if I'm a player comes to me like, let's go, bro. What are you doing? This is not what we do. So now this is collaborative, right? So I think that's where this culture piece is going to be critical here, because again, it reminds me of the old, every time you hear about championships, Joe Ken said something to me because I mentioned it on the internet. Like every time you hear somebody win a championship, oh, we're like family, we got great chemistry. No shit, really? You mean you guys aren't just fighting every day and winning every game? Like that's a joke. Like of course you got chemistry now because you're winning. I say that's the bullshit part. You have to have that already if you're going to get to the winning part. And I know that because I was on a team that did that. When I first got to the A's, we fucking sucked. We were so bad. Almost lost 100 games twice, which is the epitome of stink, right? So here we are with 50 games left to play, and if we won 50 straight, we have no chance. That's how bad we were, right? But they played hard every day. We just weren't any good. and eventually that paid off because when we got good and got players, changed how we did things, then our mental mindset took us way above those that had double the salary base that we have. And again, that's why I say about this whole commitment buying thing, like Rod's saying, like that's got to happen whether, you're at, Omar Sanchez's, standard Chevron station on the corner, or, IBM or Ford GM. You got to have that thing happening already if you're going to get good. And so this kind of culture buy-in thing, I think we're going to see some failures out there clearly. Then you go, oh shit, man, I thought that guy was good, or I thought that coach was good, or that school was good.
Well, it's been interesting watching that Last Dance documentary about the Bulls, and then talking to Coach Vermeil, and you see like the 7 years it took for Michael Jordan to get the championship, and what happened, the different coaches, how the GM was trying to get people around him to make things work, and then obviously everybody's shitting on the GM Krause because he tried to break it up. And like, Omar, obviously you're watching this, and what are you seeing in terms of like, they want people that are going to help Michael Jordan. Like Bob said, like, we need people that'll come in and do their job, whether it's Paxson hitting a shot or Michael Jordan understanding that he has to get the ball to him because he can hit the shot, and that trust. You're obviously watching it. What are you getting from that, and how does it apply to what we're talking about?
Well, all that's about the dynamic that you think about, the importance of like a Phil Jackson who understood the dynamics of his players and knew that, there was a story that I heard about Steve Kerr being responsible for Dennis Rodman, and Dennis Rodman going to Vegas for a weekend, and Steve Kerr chaperoning him because, coach knew that that's the way Rodman got out his frustrations and stuff. And so it was different from what other people were doing. But I think understanding the dynamics of the team, and obviously there's so many different personalities in that group, and seeing it, and actually seeing it when you see it on TV, and then you hear the stories, and then you kind of see this kind of be put together. I mean, the dynamics of learning how to navigate through all this and really having the buy-in, kind of like Bob said, is like, I believe it was more of a trickle down, right? Like it's Phil's Zen kind of mindset, and kind of letting that trickle down to his players, even though they were their own people.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of trust amongst everybody. Like, Pippen and Jordan trusting that Dennis needed this. Also, Jackson recognizing it, and then obviously at the front office too.
And you heard so many times like, oh, Michael Jordan's an asshole. You guys see that guy, but when you play with him, he's an asshole. And then you hear later like, oh, well, he just demanded the best, just kind of like, the best dude. Like Kobe, same thing. He got that same rep, and so everyone fits a role, and you have to be really good at your role in order for the team to succeed. And I think they understood that. They understood that, like, that whole Dennis segment where he said, no one else was going to do what I was going to do. No one was going to go rebound and fight and be nasty and enjoy doing it, because you couldn't see Pippen doing that. But there was that kind of stuff is contagious. And so then the Bulls that's how they kind of overcame the whole Piston thing, because the Pistons really had their number for a while and were kicking the crap out of them. And they kind of, Rodman brought that toughness to what they did, and he kind of deterred and deflected. If someone got in, one of their teammates' face, who was the first guy that was going there? And then Bill Cartwright would then, see Dennis stand up for his teammates. And then, the NBA was a lot different then, and it was borderline hockey in the sense of, the officials will let certain things go until someone threw a punch, and then, chaos broke. But I believe that everyone understood their role, and they were going to be the best at their role that they could be. And that they knew that was the way they were going to have to win. So that trickled down from Phil Jackson, I think, really resonated throughout the team.
Yeah, no, that was definitely clear. And I think it's been really interesting watching that. And I had a question for Rob. Like, I mean, what Omar's saying is a lot of time the means justify the end. So if they let Rodman go do this and you know, I've heard that Jordan was abusive to a lot of the players, especially the tall white guys, who were, you know, a little slower and all that. So he was verbally abusive. Like, I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't say he wasn't, right? Um, so does that apply in an organization if the culture is about like we have to win? Um, can some of these things be overlooked? Like I posted something, I listened to Bill Gates talking about how we're going to handle this COVID thing, and he sounded really intelligent about the approach, but I don't think anybody's asking him like, what should we do? Like from the administration's point of view, like, hey, let's talk to Bill Gates, and because he's been involved with the pandemic stuff. And then I put it on Facebook, and people are like, Bill Gates is evil. Like he's, you know, he's going to put microchips in our brains. And I'm like, well, shit, he got a lot done. Like he's very successful business wise. Like I don't think the president was. So why, you know, okay, maybe he is evil, but he's getting shit done. Like Bezos, maybe we put Bezos in charge, or Musk or something. They're getting shit done. Is that enough, Rob?
Yeah, I think the higher you go up in an organization, the more you're in a position of authority, you respect people, but I don't know if you could be their friend, so to speak. You know, like the old thing where your peers and the one guy gets promoted, right? That's a tough situation to be in, because all of a sudden, if you demand upon your peers, you place demands upon your peers, now you're an asshole, right? Where you're just trying to do your job. You know, one thing I've learned, and I got this from Parcells, and it worked for him, and it works for me, and is that early in my career, I always wanted to be fair to everybody. You don't have to be fair. You have to be right, because you have an obligation to the organization, right? So what do I mean by that? So Bob's head coach and, you know, an undrafted free agent misses curfew. Well, you may cut his ass, right? Because he broke the rules. Your starting quarterback misses curfew, you're probably not going to cut him, but he may run his ass off the next day or something. You got to do it. You don't have to be fair to everybody. You have to be right with everybody. People are different. Violations are different. Some people are going to be repeat violators. Some people just made a mistake. So you have to look at everybody as an individual, and you have to look at the severity of the violation and if it's repeated. And so I'm just repeating myself. I've learned in the law, you don't have to be fair to everybody. You have to be right in regards to what's best for the organization. And there's a difference. And to tell you something else too, there's a big difference between rules and discipline. Because what discipline is creating an environment where you don't need rules. And Bobby Knight had one rule for his players and one rule only. And I think this was brilliant. His rule to his players was, don't do anything that you think I might not like. That covers a lot of territory, right? Well, if I go out here, will coach like that, or will I get in trouble? If I do this, will coach like that, or will I get in trouble? That one rule covered a lot of territory. So, you know, again, discipline is different than rules. You know, you could find people a million times, and if you have to find people a million times, you don't have discipline. And you need discipline for accountability and culture. I believe that. And the way you get that is, part of the way I think you get that is, as we're discussing this, is when you're going to have the discussion with people and they're going to be penalized for breaking the rules or not fulfilling their responsibilities or anything in between, you have to do what's best for the organization. And again, you know, oftentimes you have to be fair. You have to be right.
Yeah, because if your business goes under, it doesn't matter if you were fair. You nobody has a job, and you're screwed. But do you think it's important in certain circumstances to send a message to bolster that culture? So like if you're Bill Belichick, obviously you're probably not going to bench Brady, but maybe that guy who's the defensive back who's acting up and being a pain in the ass, we could probably get along without him. Like, you're making those kind of judgments?
Yeah, but I think I've been more successful, and the approach I take is, there's two ways you could look at this, right? So we'll go back to a player, because we're talking about sports. A player violates something, or a player does something wrong. You can really harp on that player and how it negatively affects the organization. And they should understand that and acknowledge it. The emphasis that I place in a situation where it's possible, or every situation, because I try to find a way it's possible, is how did that violation or how did that lack of accountability affect them? You're a starter. You're probably not going to be a starter now. Did it lower your position in the draft? If you're a department head, or if you're an assistant coach, did that really hurt your chances to be a head coach if you persist with this conduct? And if you put it on them, and you make them realize that how their lack of accountability is affecting their future, I think you get more buy-in because you're showing care about them versus, God damn you, you're not doing your stuff, and look, you're part of the reason why we're losing, and that doesn't go a long way in my books. But somehow that has to be a message that's acknowledged as well. But the emphasis has to be, to me, how they're affecting their own career, how it affects them personally. And I have found I got better buy-in that way in correcting so that they are producing what the expectations are.
Yeah, Omar, you had something to add to what Rob's saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been fortunate enough to be a head coach for 10 years and coaching basketball. And two things. The rule thing is obviously when you have so many rules, then you become the rule monitor, and that's tough. And so I think going back to the culture piece, for me, it's always been, never do anything that's going to jeopardize the name of the institution, the program, or you. And so that kind of gets them thinking about their actions and what they're doing every day when they're posting stuff on social media, when they're, talking, in the public market, when they're eating with people and what they're saying. I always tell them that everyone's always listening, especially when you don't have football on a campus, and your basketball team is your tier 1 sport, so they get a lot of attention. And so I would say with the rule piece, for me, I've always that's been my ultimate rule. And then the other piece around discipline is, I always talk about my trust bank. How much do you have in the trust bank? So going back to the example, are you going to cut the quarterback, or are you going to cut the kid that's a walk-on, or whatever? For me, it's always about the trust bank. What have you put into the trust bank? And so if you got a lot of equity in the trust bank and you mess up, then the consequence is going to be a little bit different. There's always a consequence to an action, but it all depends on what you have in the trust bank. So I just wanted to add to that.
Great. Thank you, Omar. Ryan, you wanted to add to it as well?
Sure. So kind of not to be nuanced with Rob about language and everything, but when I talk to my kids, I actually say, I'm not going to treat you equally. I'm going to treat you fairly. And we're more about equity here at Parkway Central than we are about equality. So equity is this idea where we have expectations, and then we as a program are doing things for everybody to succeed in their realm based on who they are, what they are, their goals, and all of that. If we're talking about equality, then it paints you in a corner. Dr. Wooden used to talk about that all the time. Have rules, have expectations, have things that you're clear about to your athletes that these are violations, but then don't be so clear in what the consequence is, because then you have no flexibility in terms of how you respond to the negative action. And I always feel like it's important to be clear on what the expectations are, but then have a window and provide yourself wiggle room in terms of how you're going to respond in said punishment and expectation to that. Bobby Knight, for example, what does that mean? It means you might be slapped on national television. I don't know, because if you disrespect the program, obviously we don't want to go there, but there are things that we can do to help move things along, which fits into that idea of social equity, which was brought up by Omar. And then the other side of it is importance, in terms of this kid has not earned the social equity. This kid hasn't earned that because they've built up and shown and proven over time that they've been responsible when challenged over and over again, versus this kid is brand new in the program and right out of the gate is making some seriously poor choices and bad decisions. We don't even have a honeymoon period before we have the divorce. And so that's something that I think we need to think about when we discuss this stuff. And when we look at culture, that evolves over time as well. And it's never put on autopilot. You got to feed it every day. But as you're feeding it, it's changing. And you've got to provide yourself some sort of flexibility within a structure, that's clear to these kids and athletes and young adults how you respond.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Ryan. I wanted to throw it back at Rob and then maybe get a few other people who are involved in private business, because I see this as a time when you can kind of evaluate people like as part of your culture, as part of your business plan. And maybe there's people who haven't been pulling their weight. And we knew that in the past, but now it's really apparent. Maybe they want us, hey, I should be getting paid more because I'm really important, but they haven't really truly been pulling their weight. And I'll get Dean to jump in on that as well. Is it the same in a team situation, like a sporting team or a pro team, as it is as a private business, Rob, or is it a little different?
No, I think it's a very comparable. I think, you have a CEO, you have a head coach, you have an assistant coach, you have a vice president, you have a position coach, you have a department head, and then within the department you have your players, and within the position coaches, et cetera, your players. I think it's very, very similar. I just think the nuances, the specifics of the nuances change. I think the way you avoid, or the way you make people aware of that they don't overinflate their thoughts about themselves, is that you have to have communication with them on a daily basis so that they understand what they're doing right. And I think they should be rewarded what they're doing right. I think they should be praised what they're doing right. And I don't think if they're doing something right, it should stay within a department. I think the whole company should know, so that they are reinforced for their efforts. And if they're doing wrong, is it going to be rise and grind? If you're doing something wrong, or if they need help, then that's been communicated every day, so that it's not like just having a year-end review and all of a sudden they say, well, this is what I did all year and you owe me this, or I deserve this or that. It's a factor of daily communication with them, so that by doing that, you are on the same page. There is more self-awareness. Communication is key with regards to culture and accountability. That's a big piece of the foundation, in my opinion.
Okay. Sorry, we're just having some feedback on your call there, Rob. I don't know why. If I mute you, it's gone. But anyways.
Hey, Rob's playing my YouTube video. It's in the background. So that's my voice through Rob's
I know.
phone.
I'm like,
I saw that.
Rob, you're multitasking. I really not part of the Zoom culture here. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had some problems hearing it because Ryan was audio bombing you.
So I turned this thing off.
Does somebody else want to jump in while Rob has an IT crisis here? On that note, we're just talking about getting people on board and evaluating. Like I as an example, I was praising somebody from an NBA performance staff, because he's like working hard. He's like, okay, well, how are we going to make sure the players do this? And I'm sending these workouts out and I'm using technology in this way. And I'm like, well, and I think I got this from Francois too. There's a lot of teams where people are sitting on their hands. Like even in the NHL, and Francois, you might want to touch on this again. There's teams going, shit, we're not making the playoffs anyway, so let's just go into neutral. And what kind of culture is that in terms of like, maybe you should be stepping on it now. Maybe, Francois, you want to touch on that and what you've heard, what's happening in the league?
Yeah, it's really weird to me that all these teams are not like not most of them, but some of them, a lot of them are not doing anything. I talked to an assistant coach this week, and he was telling me how boring his situation it is right now, because he's not challenged. Nobody's feeding him. He's not having any responsibility. So he was watching like old videotapes to try to challenge himself and stuff like that. I was shocked to see that he wants to do something, but he's stuck, you know, and he can't do anything. So that's really weird to me to hear about that, especially at that level. You know, it's a huge team. It was really shocking to me to hear from him, and I don't know what to say about that. You know.
Are other people hearing that as well? Like, there's just some people who are just like, yeah, whatever, it'll return back to normal, and then I'll just show up, I'll drive to work and do my job as usual. Bob, have you had any, talks with people about that? Maybe people aren't, whatever,
No, I
pulling
mean,
the weight.
I don't think any, no, what should I say? Yeah, as I said before, I think there's plenty of people doing that, whether they're saying they're doing it or not.
Yeah.
You know, they're handing out programs. When was the last time you talked to your team? Oh, you know, it's been a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. Like, I don't think you can do that. I think that's happening out there. Collegiately, I think it's probably a little bit less because school's still going on. You have mental health, you have nutrition. There's so many other things that you have to keep in touch with these kids with that you could say, oh, by the way, you know, I accidentally just remembered you had the train. So how's that going? You know, but yeah, I mean, I think people are doing that, dude. I think they're just probably not because they don't, you know, because they think we're coming back soon. I just think because they, you know, oh, we're a big school. We're really good, and you know, the kids need a break anyway. I think it's happening.
And I assume most people are still getting paid. Like, I don't know what the collegiate situation is, but people are still getting their paychecks. And is that a false sense of security? Should there be some incentive around, like, hey, you need to do this, you need to clock in? What do you think about that?
The word is that's happening in the academic world, perhaps, because, you know, they got online courses and, you know, they're going to be asked to do certain things in the summer. But in our case, you know, those professors are covered by the union. So I mean, it has to be the union that says they can do that. And I think it's like the old employer-employee battle, right? You know, I'm going to do the least amount of work and try to get the most money. And the employer says, I want you to do the most amount of work for the least amount of money. And they're like, yeah, give me a call when school comes back. You know, one of those things. So, but I have not heard. I have heard from some of the other pro organizations that, you know, there's narratives in their contracts that says with a work stoppage. So it's covered as work stoppage. You know, pay will be reduced by 50%, or, you know, there'll be no paycheck at all. Or, you know, now we're starting to see a little bit, which is, I don't know, it's kind of bullshit to me. When you got these ADs and these coaches making $3, $4, $5 million a year, like, oh, okay, you know, we'll contribute a little bit. That's the funniest goddamn thing to me.
Yeah,
I haven't heard.
Because moving forward, like, I think if this doesn't change, like, say, you know, we let Georgia and Florida out, and then everybody gets sick again, and then, okay, so that's going to delay things. Is this going to be till the vaccine happens? We don't even know what's happening with that. But like Rob and I have talked about this, like, is this January? Is this March 2021? So what happens between now and then financially? You know, are we going to, like, a friend of mine, Don Saladino in New York City, I think his rent's like 50, 60 grand a month. His lease runs out at the end of this month. So now he has to renegotiate. Does he want to have a brick and mortar business to continue? Will his landlord, because the landlord needs money too,
Right.
will he just say, will they kick him out and say, like, Don, forget it, I can get somebody in here? Because we know he's not going to get somebody in a 15,000 square foot space in Soho for 50 grand or 60 grand a month. So now he wants to keep Don. So is that a month to month lease? Is that a 1 year? Is that a 6 month? Like, I mean, this is going to happen with everybody's employees too. Like, do we keep you on? Do we sign you for a longer contract? Like, it's going to be really interesting, I think, in terms of everybody's approach professionally, financially. Rob, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think that it comes down to a negotiation, right? So in Don's case, he may say, if his lease is expiring, he's got no financial obligation. He's out of the lease.
Yeah.
He may say, I'm going to sit back for a year or try to develop a different business and go back to the brick and mortar, you know, a year from now. Or he may say, to the landlord, look, I understand you have to pay your bills and your taxes and your mortgage and everything else like everybody else who's a landlord. So I want 3 months free rent. And then my next 3 months are going to be at 20 grand. And my next 3 months are going to be at 40 grand. And then I'm going to finish the year at 60,000. But instead of signing a 5-year lease, I'm going to sign a 6-year lease. So you're going to make it up on the back end. And this way it's a win-win. Something like that may happen. I'm curious with player contracts because, and again, I keep forgetting the name of this thing, but if you have a natural disaster, sometimes that violates, if there's a clause in the contract on the ownership side, then, essentially if that clause is in there, if there's a natural disaster, all bets are off. What if a player doesn't, or what if the ownership doesn't have that clause in their contract? Then it's a factor of, look, if we pay everybody, we're out of business. So everybody voluntarily agrees to pay cuts. Or you might have some people saying, sorry, you violated my contract. I am now a free agent, and maybe want to go that route. And legally, they're entitled to go that route. I'm not an attorney, and I don't draw up contracts. But you have a lot of different scenarios. Just because we're in a natural crisis, if those conditions are not in an act of God, yeah, but it's more than an act of God, Ryan. I forget the exact term.
Act of China. No, sorry. Just...
if that's not in the contract, you may have, and someone's not willing to voluntarily take pay cuts or do certain aspects that you would assume should be done, then you could have a legal situation on your hand.
Yeah, certainly the lawyers are still going to have a lot of work here, but yeah, any sort of, it does come back to this culture thing, Rob. Like, what's the culture of the people that I'm working with and that I deal with? Is there going to be trust? And we're going to work this out together, or am I going to try to stiff you on this? Or
listen, we have over 2,000 employees, right? And so we have your bell-shaped curve, right? You take a guy like Jack Welch from GE. He used to review his staff every year, and every year he fired the bottom 10%. Because he didn't feel that they were worth anything. And even if someone coming through the doors is as green as anything, they've got to be better than my bottom 10%. And if they're not, I'll get rid of them next year. You have people that have that culture, right? It just varies, so, but if I was Don, that's how, knee-jerk reaction. That's how I would handle the landlord thing. If I even wanted to go brick and mortar, this thing may take some time. I may not want to be in any brick and mortar and save my money, have my financial runway. So when things are better, I'll find a new spot. Or if that building has not been rented out yet, I might get even a better deal where I don't have to negotiate free rent. I just got a lower rent over the 5-year period than I would have, a better lease than my previous one. So who knows,
Yeah, like his business is unique in that I don't think I've been in there and it's ever been packed, like, because they have like Ryan Reynolds working out over here and Jake Gyllenhaal. And so that's the environment they want there. Very few people who pay a decent amount of money to work out there. So I think his scenario is a little different than, say, an Equinox, right? Or a group fitness place.
Well, he's at a distinct advantage, right? Because he has this social distancing worked in his normal business operations before COVID. Yes. So he knows how to pay a $50,000 monthly rent, in his normal operations. He doesn't have to make any adjustment, right? He just has to keep things sterile. But his social distancing is already in place, so he can count on the same volume post-COVID, as you're going through COVID than he had before COVID. But if you had these gyms that were packed, and now you have to have social distancing and these other things, you're not going to have the volume of clientele you had previously. And is that new volume going to pay your bills? It's a whole new ball game right now until whenever things get back to whatever the new normal is going to be. So Don may have an advantage based on what you just said.
That's a big calculation. And you mentioned that before, is what is the square footage that'll allow me to maintain my business and cover my costs and all that. That's a huge algorithm right now. Anybody else have any thoughts on that before we sign off? No, everybody's pretty happy with how they're doing things. Oh, geez. Well, I just want to thank everybody. We didn't have a large group today, but certainly I thought it was a pretty valuable discussion. And I mean, we're going to continue having these discussions until we figure out what the hell's going on. Rob, you got any final things to say before we sign off?
No, I'm sorry. I clicked on that YouTube video.
That's Banta. That's on Banta. Come on, Banta. Just try to promote yourself within our little Zoom community here. That's really counterculture.
Come on, man. It was a culture talk, but I didn't think he was going to be so excited about it that he'd jump on it right away, you know?
Come on, coach. Everything you put out there, I got to check out.
Clickbait Banta. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and continue to be safe. And I enjoy talking to you on a weekly basis. Take care.
Take care.